Okay, now we make it to Henry II, the first king of House Plantagenet. Now, this is something I did study in school, so I know a fair bit about Henry II. He's born in 1133, and he's Matilda's son from the anarchy. Yeah, so Stephen and Matilda. So that is a complete load of chaos that period of time. But not only was he king of England, he was also Count of Anjou. He was Count of Maine. He was Duke of Normandy. He was Duke of Aquitaine. He was Count of Nantes, and he was Lord of Ireland as well as King of England. So it's called the Angevin Empire. Basically controls half of France, bits of Ireland, bits of Wales, and England. Yeah, this is where we have the constant warfare between England and France for like 800 years. This is part of the reason why. There were two things he wished to do domestically in England due to the anarchy. He wished to reform English common law and reform the church. Two big reforms. So the English common law was actually one of the few successes he had. Think about it, because his reign is chaos in the second half. The first half, he reforms English common law because of the anarchy, which has given us even more of the basis that Henry I had put in place many years before, which give us the basis of Parliament, legal system, legal rights, and eventually leads to Magna Carta with his son John. What he does here leads to various other things and treaties that come through and evolution of law that we have today, where you have a legal system, a parliament, judiciary, rights in marriage, divorce, etc. It all stems from the reforms he brings in with common law, which is there also to give the landed gentry land rights as well. So the land registry, much like the Domesday Book, there are a few things that certain kings do that actually have an effect today. So the Domesday Book starts it, where you register the land, and he reforms it. But he also wished to reform the relationship between the church and the crown. One of his officials, Thomas Becket, is also a drinking buddy of his as well. He's an English commoner, so he speaks English as a first language, not French, which would be spoken by Henry. So Old English and Old French, they're different things. But he promotes him to Archbishop of Canterbury. It's his appointment. He can appoint an Archbishop of Canterbury because the place is now vacant because the last one died. And the Pope accedes to this. The Pope is happy with Thomas Becket being Archbishop of Canterbury and wearing the cloth of the clergy. He thinks because Thomas is his friend, things will be easier in reforming how he wants the relationship between state and church to work. But no, Thomas actually takes his appointment very seriously and becomes very religious and a very big pain in the arse. So there's 10 years of disagreement and a souring of relationship between the two men, which ends up in Thomas Becket's murder, which is an accident that Henry doesn't want to happen. Henry's a very furious man. He has a temper on him. He's a very fiery character, and he blurts out during a feast somewhere in one of his royal residences in the south of England, can someone reveal this troublesome priest? 4 of his knightly retinue decide to, whilst drunk, mount their horses and ride to Canterbury and kill Thomas Becket. And I will do a video on the death of Thomas Becket and the 4 knights involved who did kill him later on. I do have a book on it as well, so I can go through the four men who killed Thomas Becket in 1170, which leads to Henry being excommunicated, which damages the church relationship with the crown for a while. He has to do penance before he's recommunicated by the Pope. A few years later, now that it's seen that Henry does have this temper and is losing control of his own self, and he's been linked with this, his position's weakened. So his eldest son, young Henry, who's the crown prince, has been given sort of a co-ruler type dynamic within the empire. He can be given some control, although it's pretty much a puppet position because he's not trusted. He decides to rebel along with 2 of his other brothers, Richard and Geoffrey. And let's have a look at the kids that Henry II had with his wife, Eleanor. William the Ninth, Count of Poitiers. Yeah. Henry, who's the oldest survivor because William has now predeceased him. Matilda, Duchess of Saxony, that is in the Holy Roman Empire. That's going to become important later on. Richard the Lionheart will become Richard I of England. Geoffrey II, Duke, or Geoffrey II, depending on how you pronounce it, Duke of Brittany. So yeah, Brittany has now come under the fold of the Angevin Empire as well, although it's sort of an independent country in itself at this point. Henry would like it to be part of the Angevin Empire, but Geoffrey has other ideas. Eleanor, Queen of Castile, so that's now in modern-day Spain. Joan, Queen of Sicily, that's now in modern-day Italy. They'll be busy. They're dynastic, they're basically alliances, which are important. And of course, the youngest one, John, otherwise known as Lackland, because he's the youngest, and he's very similar to Henry I. He's just giving a bit of cash. He has no land. Richard and John would become kings of England in their turn after Henry's death, and they have financial issues of their own. And Richard the Lionheart is not actually a good king as people think. he spends only 6 months in his dominions in France and England. He spends most of his time in the Middle East, or in prison in Austria. The Great Revolt starts in 1173 and carries on pretty much to 1189, on and off. Basically, Henry starts rebelling. Richard and Geoffrey will change sides quite a bit. Sometimes Richard is on side, sometimes he's against. Henry dies during this period, so it's now Richard as the heir to the throne. Geoffrey, I think, also dies as well. So it's Richard and John that are basically left right at the end of Henry's reign. But John's on the side at first. And John's actually quite a good soldier as well, just because he's called that, and historians are giving him a negative connotation. And you think of Robin Hood. Negative connotation. John is not actually as bad as people think. The country was ruined when John got hold of it by this. The Angevin Empire starts crumbling because of all this conflict, mostly in France. Most of the conflict actually takes place in Anjou, Maine, Normandy, Aquitaine, and Nantes. It doesn't actually take place in England. England's actually surprisingly stable. It's the lands in France that are a complete mess. Anyway, John switches sides, and Henry has a stomach ulcer that damn near kills him, and it does kill him in 1189. So now Richard and John are vying for power, and they're both on the same side now. Henry is isolated, and he dies in Chinon Castle in Anjou, in his homeland, in 1189. The good thing about his reign is the reformation of English common law and English rights for English nobles. England is actually surprisingly stable at this time. It's the lands outside of England that are a mess. Ireland, the Anglo-Norman settlement of Ireland that is continuing now with the Anglo-Irish settlement, is reasonably stable around the Dublin area. It's a very prosperous port. The French lands are in chaos. Because they are under the English common law reform, their legal system is completely different. Brittany's is similar, but is also different. So the lands in France in the Angevin Empire are going to start to fall apart very, very quickly. They're basically bankrupt when Richard the Lionheart decides to go on crusade. So John has to pick up the bill later on when he becomes king. But Henry's reign disintegrates pretty quickly at the end. He dies abroad, outside of England, in Anjou, which he's also count of, so it's one of his lands anyway. And his French lands in the Angevin Empire are basically bankrupted by the constant warfare for the last 15, 16 years of constant warfare have basically bankrupted the French dominions of the Angevin Empire. But Richard will succeed him as the Richard the Lionheart, and John will obviously be now Crown Prince. And of course, the women can't succeed at this point. They are, wives of other kings and dukes, so they're taken out of the picture. But House Plantagenet's here, and already it's shown to be a bloody dynasty. We've only just started, and we've got a lot more to go. So the Plantagenets are here to stay until the Tudor times, till the 1480s. We have another 300 extra years of this chaos, and it is mostly chaos under the Plantagenets. They're not the most stable kings. But here we go. So there we go. That's a brief overlook of the reign of Henry II. At this point, this was England's. The Angevin Empire was as large as England would get at the time until the British Empire many years later and colonisation of the New World. But half of France was English. Yeah. This sowed the seeds for the 100 Years' War about a century later as well, but we'll leave that for another day. And I thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe, place your comments below, and I'll have some more videos for you soon.